Hello there, wrestling fans. Welcome to another episode, or good morning there, Ringside crew. Welcome to another episode of the internationally known Dudes at Ringside podcast. I'm your host, Joe the Panther the Third. And this morning, Ringside crew, you're in for a treat. We have a gentleman that I met, if you're not familiar of the interview I did with this gentleman on the Twins at Ringside Instagram page. He's doing awesome things. He's a nice gentleman. Let's give a warm Dudes at Ringside welcome to Brian Hardy. Welcome, brother. Welcome.
What's up, Joe? Thanks so much for having me today. And I think you would say it's the second generation sensation, Brian Hardy.
I was waiting for you to do that because you did that so good when you did the interview at the Allentown show. Man, so Brian, since the last time we were hanging out in the Allentown area, what have you been up to, man?
Man, life's been good. I'm just, sitting here in Baltimore at home right now, being a father, being a husband, taking care of business on that end. But also, the wrestling world is going crazy because we are talking about USW, the relaunch, United States Wrestling, which we'll get into, I'm sure, sometime in this podcast. But I'm just so excited. We have so much stuff on the itinerary to get talking about today.
Yes, so let's go back, like old VHS tape from the 90s. So what got you into the wrestling business?
Well, I was about 2 years old, and it's kind of reminiscent of what just took place this past week in professional wrestling, because I was 2 years old when I saw SummerSlam 1992, Bret Hart and the British Bulldog, Wembley Stadium, London, England. And AEW obviously just hosted their show All In at Wembley Stadium this past week, has the wrestling world buzzing and everything like that, which is great. But I was just I've been a lifelong fan of pro wrestling. My dad was a professional wrestler in the WWF, WCW, and ECW under the name Barry Hardy. Some may have known him as a Toxic Turtle. Some may have known him as an Executioner, that kind of stuff with Gillberg, Dwayne Gill. And it was just like I was born and bred for professional wrestling. Most kids, I've been quoted many times in newspaper articles saying this. Most kids grew up with a pacifier or a bottle. I grew up chewing on a Hulk Hogan action figure. So, I mean, that's the reality of the nature is I've always been in professional wrestling in some way, shape, or form. I've been around it my entire life, and I wouldn't have known anything different. And I knew it was something that I wanted to do since I was a little kid, and I got to live my dream.
That's awesome. You know, it's so cool that what people wrestlers like yours, they didn't just come into this business thinking, oh, this will be fun. You have family that was in the business. Like when you were like a kid, what was it like to have a dad, is family like that's in the business? Did you have a lot of kids in school say, oh, can you get this picture signed for me or stuff like that? Or was it
Well, it was kind of crazy because my mom and my dad actually they separated when I was 2. So, but my dad was working for the WWF at the time. So it was weird because, most people, their relationships with their dad is I'm going to go out and play ball in the yard, or I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go do that. It was I remember my mom would stick me up on her waterbed as a kid, and she'd be like, your dad's on Monday Night Raw tonight. He's wrestling the Steiner brothers, or this or that. And those were my earliest memories of even knowing who my dad was, that my dad was a traveling professional wrestler, a journeyman, as they like to say. And it was one of those things where just as a kid, as I got older, it's I would see my dad pop up on the front cover of WWF programs with Marty Jannetty and different stuff like that. And I was like, yo, this guy is my dad. We didn't, like I said, we didn't have the greatest relationship when I was younger and stuff like that. And we've worked on it in my adult life. But it was just one of those things where I was like, I'm going to do that when I grow up. And it was hard because, like I said, a lot of other people, a lot of kids, especially you just brought up school, a lot of other kids would literally be like, yeah, my dad's a doctor, or my dad's a lawyer, or my dad is a dentist, or this or that. And it was like, what does your dad do for a living? And I'm like, my dad travels around the world with the WWF. So it was kind of crazy back then as a kid to have to explain that to people. And, of course, unless you've got pictures back in the day, we didn't have the internet like what we've got right now, so unless you've got pictures to prove that your dad was really a wrestler and this and that, nobody would believe you. So it's kind of like one of those things where like I had a brother who was 6 years older than me, and he would get to go backstage at WWF all the time. So he had pictures with like the Rockers and the Barbarian and the Warlord and this person and that person, British Bulldog, everything. And would constantly, I'd have those pictures and I'd take them into school and say like, this is my older brother. And he was, at this show with my dad where you got to meet all these people. And of course, people were mind blown. And as a kid, I had no idea that the caliber of talent that my dad was wrestling when I was younger. Like I had no clue that my dad was wrestling The Undertaker and Kerry Von Erich and all these guys, I had no idea. Like I couldn't scratch the surface on the amount of talent that he was working with at the time.
That's crazy. Cause like with my grandfather, Jose Quinones, my dad now tells me stories. And when I tell people the people that he would like hang out with, like one of my grandfather's best friends was Haystacks Calhoun.
Awesome.
And like, he used to travel around. Like my grandfather had a hatchback. My grandfather had a hatchback, and he'd put Haystacks in the back because he was such a big dude. And like you tell people that, and they're like, "He hung out with Haystacks Calhoun. Do you realize how cool that is?" And I'm like, "I know that's cool," but kids my age were like, "Who's that? Who's Haystacks Calhoun?" Like the younger wrestling fans really weren't familiar. So let's go a little like closer in to your like when you got, what was it like to go into your first day for practice, like training for like to become a wrestler?
Well, that was rough. Like I said, I live here in Baltimore, so about 10 minutes down the road, I live in a little suburb. Actually, like I live about 12 minutes away from the Baltimore Arena, so I live in Linthicum, Maryland. I grew up in Pasadena, Maryland, and the first wrestling school that I ever stepped foot in was in Dundalk, Maryland, or Essex, Maryland, which is about 25 minutes from where I live right now across the bridge. And I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I went and I begged and asked everybody if they would train me. I remember even getting on the phone and calling Gilbert and saying like, "Hey, Uncle Dwayne, do you think there's any chance that you could train me?" I'm like 17 years old, a senior in high school, and I knew this was what I wanted to do my whole life. And I said, "Is there any way you could train me?" And he was like, "Well, Brian, I'll talk to your mother, and if you think that this is really what you want to do and blah, 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 we'll consider doing it, but call me again next year when you turn 18 or whatever." And I was heartbroken. I was like, "Oh man, like I can't waste any more time. Like I just got to get it done." So I found like a little tiny independent wrestling company, which I won't mention the name of, and found an independent wrestling company about 30 minutes from here. And they said like, "Do you want to be a wrestler?" And really what happened was we rented for my 18th birthday, we rented the school out, which is totally like something that I would never recommend somebody to do. Like if you are, if you want to be a wrestler, like there's a way to go about it. And I don't think I honestly went about it the right way at all. I had been wrestling my whole entire life on trampolines and in backyards and stuff like that. But it was one of those things where like, I thought that I could prep an entire match on a trampoline and then go into a ring and do it. And I mean, it worked. I'll say it worked, but not everybody is that lucky. And we rented this wrestling school out, and the guy that was the owner was pretty much just looking to make money. And he was like, "Yeah, if you guys want to have a birthday party here, you can, just wrestle around in the ring and do whatever you want and this and that." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And we planned an entire show with all my buddies from high school who didn't know like anything about wrestling. And we all like got together and wrestled in the ring. And then after the show was over with, the promoter said, "Hey, why don't you actually sign up for this wrestling school? Like, why don't you just start wrestling here and we'll teach you and this and that." So that's what I did. And I signed up and I was on a payment plan, and about, 2 months in, 3 months in, I still wasn't learning anything. And it was like, I totally believe in like paying your dues, and I believe in like, getting beat up and hazed and all that other kind of stuff that used to happen in the business that doesn't happen nowadays. I believe in all that kind of stuff. But it was rough because I was like, they're just kicking the living hell out of me, and like I'm not learning anything. I'm like, so what am I going to do? And they pretty much about 2 months in, nobody was teaching me anything. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. So I actually quit pro wrestling. I tell everybody I quit pro wrestling like probably about 10 times before I actually legitimately became serious about it, because I was just like, they're just beating me up. Like, they're not teaching me anything. I'm not learning anything. This is terrible. I think I passed out the first day because I had to do like so many squats and so many jumping jacks and different things like that. I wasn't cut for it right away. I thought I was cut for it here, but I wasn't cut for it physically. And it eventually worked to the point where, fast forward, I had rekindled a relationship with my father. I purchased my own ring because I felt like I wasn't being treated fairly. I felt like I was being kind of blackballed already in the business. And I purchased my first ring off of eBay from a guy in Kentucky, bought it, called my dad on the phone and said, "You're living in Florida right now. I'm living in Maryland. Will you come down to Maryland and teach me how to wrestle?" And he was like, "If you can get the ring." I said, "It's already on its way." So between that and between the great Axel Rotten, RIP, he's no longer with us, and Gil Berg, those were the three guys that really helped train me, really helped hone my craft. And there was some other guys that would pop in and out occasionally, but I was 18, 19 years old with 2 full-size pro wrestling rings in my backyard. So
wow. That's kind of cool. Like, most kids want a swing set. Most kids want a pool, above ground pool, because some kids dream, ground and ground. But you had every kid in the 90s and the 80s wanted the dream to actually have a wrestling ring in the background. I would have been like, "Do what now?"
It was crazy. It was crazy. The neighbors, like I would say you could hear somebody taking a bump in the ring, and like 3 blocks over, it sounded like bowling. Like, it sounded like someone was throwing a bowling ball down a lane. Like, I'm like, it had to be annoying for the neighbors, because we, it wasn't like we were living on a ton of acre of land and stuff like that. Like, we were in a tiny little suburban community, and like the neighbors would walk out back on their deck and like look over the fence and like see us like doing drills, lock up, shoot off, tackle, step over, like this and that. And like, I'm sure they were probably like, "What is going on right now?"
What year was this? Because anybody else I know would be like, any Karen in this era would be like, "I'm on the phone."
I was gonna say this was 2008, 2009. So I mean, to think we're in 2023, this would have never flown. Like, that definitely somebody would have called the police by now. Somebody would have literally said, "There's a noise disturbance. There's this, there's that." There's nothing like that back then. Everybody, all my neighbors, for the most part, were pretty supportive. My next door neighbors were in their 60s, and they literally were like, "As long as you stop by as long as you don't start before 10 a.m. and as long as you don't stop, or as long as you stop by around like 5 p.m. so that way our dinner hour is quiet, then we're good with it." And they were super supportive. So I was like, that was cool.
That's nice that the couple that lived next door to you, they were okay with it. A lot of people are very like not so good with stuff like that. So let's go a little bit further in your thing. What was it like to step through the curtain as a wrestler for your very first match? What was your energy like?
2009, April 4th, 2009, Buffalo, New York. I wrestled for Next Era Wrestling, NEW. They are now known as ESW, Empire State Wrestling.
Oh, wow, they changed their name? Wow.
Yeah, they did. Different owners and partnerships and stuff like that over the years, but they were Next Era Wrestling when I debuted for them, and then they changed it to ESW, Empire State Wrestling, in the Buffalo, New York area. So, I mean, we're talking, I was minutes away from Niagara Falls. So I got to see Niagara Falls so many times in my life because of pro wrestling, which is really cool. Got to do the Maid of the Mist and all that kind of stuff. So you get to, kind of, sometimes you don't always get to visit and enjoy, stuff like that. I made a point on any wrestling trip I've ever been over the years to enjoy the surrounding areas around it. So I'm just a few minutes from Niagara Falls making my debut. Check out Niagara Falls for the first time with my dad. Got to tag team with my dad on my very first match. It was my dad and myself, which our tag team name was Bad Sensation. The bad boy Barry Hardy, the second generation sensation Brian Hardy, Bad Sensation, wrestled 2 different teams. It was a kind of a tag gauntlet, and we wrestled the Amanon boys second. And the first team that we wrestled, I think it was called Southern Comfort. We defeated Southern Comfort in the first couple minutes of the match, and then we ended up losing and getting eliminated by the Amana Boys. So in my very first pro wrestling match, I pinned a guy and won, and then I also got pinned and lost in a matter of a couple minutes time. So
that's crazy. That's crazy that you got a chance to tag with your dad. Like, what was that like to tag with your dad?
It was amazing. We got to, it's different styles. I was the new generation. He was the old generation. So we kind of complemented each other well with a lot of things we did. We won tag team championships in Maryland. We won tag team championships in Ohio together, that kind of stuff. So stuff that you don't see too often. We used to have newspapers constantly doing articles on us in different states and talking about father-son tag team. And not that it didn't happen, before in the history of wrestling, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is nowadays, where people, talk about it all the time. And hey, the father-son tag team and this and that. I mean, you meet a lot of guys that the father is a wrestler and maybe he wasn't so successful, and then the son is a wrestler and he wasn't so successful. But my dad and I, we both got to be on WWE television. We both got to be tag team champions together. We both got to do a bunch of different stuff together over the years. So it kind of, for as great as our life wasn't outside of the ring, in the ring for, the few minutes that we would spend with each other on these shows, it kind of made our relationship better than what it was. So
that's good that you guys got a chance to like talk it out and make your relationship a little bit better. So like, let's flash to now, all this excitement with you, this new adventure you're doing with USW. Let's talk about that, man.
Yeah, so I was a wrestling promoter starting in 2010. I ran my first show called United States Wrestling, USW. And then we kind of switched gears and stopped promoting under that name because we wanted to jump the gun really quickly. We wanted to be able to try to branch out and do things and stuff. And then I said, we're going to just kind of run a little homegrown company, and we're going to call this company MWF, the Maryland Wrestling Federation. And in 2011, we started hosting shows under the name MWF, where I wrestled many of my most important matches in my career. Obviously, like I said, we could talk about my WWE matches and all that kind of stuff and everything, but where I really made who I am today was with the three letters MWF. I've wrestled Eric Young, Robbie E., Jerry the King Lawler, so many different guys over the years for the MWF Heavyweight Championship, and that belt really made my career what it was. And for years, just kept promoting MWF shows, MWF shows, MWF shows. This past year, the pandemic in 2020 had really hit hard for everyone. I was working for WWE nonstop before the pandemic happened, doing extra work. I was appearing on, Raw or on Main Event as part of the No Way Jose Conga line. I was taking, knees to the face from Buddy Murphy on 205 Live. I was pretty much doing whatever WWE needed me to do at the time. Wrestled the Viking Raiders on Monday Night Raw, wrestled Ryback on SmackDown, that kind of stuff. It got to the point where I just didn't want to be called up to be that guy anymore, but the pandemic kind of decided that for me anyway, because they pretty much put a policy into effect after the pandemic happened that I didn't necessarily agree with, and I won't go into too much on here. But I pretty much said no way, and they haven't had me back since. And it's nothing personal on their end. I understand they've got a business to run, and I also just have morals to keep. So I haven't been back to work for WWE since 2019, which kind of stinks. But 2023, I decided, you know what? I can't wait around any longer. I'm not getting any younger. I'm 33 years old. I can't wait for the phone to ring and it be WWE. I can't wait for AEW to eventually email me back because truth be told, I have emailed AEW numerous times and asked to be a part of AEW in some capacity. And the two times, probably out of the dozen times that they got back to me, they just told me, unfortunately, Brian, sorry, we don't have anything for you at the moment, and this and that. And I was like, okay, cool. And I love AEW. I love the product, but I just kind of gave up on it. I said, you know what? I need to do this for myself. I need to do this. And I need to build a foundation for the rest of my life that I can be proud of and a legacy. I was very proud of the MWF. And this year I actually just was inducted into the MWF Hall of Fame, which I swore up and down I would never do. So that happened in July of this past year, just last month, and great class that went in as well that year. But now the table has turned, and it is now USW again, and we are looking to branch out into multiple different states. We're looking to run shows in Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, New Jersey, Ohio, New York. We have so many different plans. Delaware. We have so many different plans for the next year, and we decided last week was the time that we were going to start unveiling some of these plans. We held our very first press conference last week. It was open to the public and the media as well. And that took place just about 10, 15 minutes down the road from here. And we released so many big plans, including something that I'm very, very, very excited about right now. The first ever Brian Hardy, second generation sensation USW action figure comes out in the spring of 2024. I've had so many different companies do prototype figures of me. Things that I have one off of, like you go into my DTOF in my bedroom, I've got, the one-off wrestling buddy or the one-off action figure here or there or whatever, but I didn't approve of releasing that to the public. This is a figure that we've signed a contract with Wrestling Tycoon for, and shout out to David Cummings because he is amazing. And we signed a contract with them to do the very first USW action figure line, which is historic. Don't know a whole lot of independent wrestling companies out there that are actually doing entire figure lines for, their promotions. So this is cool. So I am the first one in this figure line, Series 1. Danny Mays, the ring announcer. Playboy Bob Starr from WCW is now a referee for our company. He will have a figure. And my brother-in-law, who I don't think the best of, but he thinks the best of himself, Stunning Adam Armstrong, has an action figure coming out in Series 1 as well. So 4 figures, Series 1. I'm so excited. You got to understand, as a kid, talking to you earlier, 2 years old, wanting to, play with all these different action figures. And then now at 33 years old, I'm holding an action figure that I approve of, that I think is absolutely amazing and can't wait for it to come out. This is just the prototype, so it's gray right now, but it will be in full color, full paint, everything like that, with packaging and all that good stuff. But that is how legitimate USW is about to be.
Wow. So I saw the pictures on the Instagram, the belts. Oh my gosh, those title belts, the main title. Let's talk about some, if you're able to talk, let's talk about the belts.
Absolutely. So we'll work backwards. Right now in production at the moment, Muhammad Zabar, Big Time Belts, is working. We've had a great working relationship since the start of the year. He recreated all of my MWF championships for me in the way that I wanted them designed. And those are kind of just sitting around in my living room right now. They look very nice, but I needed to have those memories because MWF was such an important part of my life. And when things started going south years ago, I sold everything off. I got bitter towards the wrestling business. I sold all the belts off, sold the rings, sold everything, and was like, I'm done with pro wrestling. And I just went, many of you know that I'm a musician out there in YouTube land and wherever you're watching this right now. And it's just one of those things where I started playing music and traveling again and kind of just, my heart has always been in pro wrestling, but I kind of just took a step back and went, I can't do this right now. So repurchased all the MWF belts, have them here in my house, have them locked away in glass cases and DTOFs, everything. They look great. Muhammad Zabar has done a great job with it. I said, I want you to make the USW titles. So we've got the Lady Liberty Championship, which is being designed right now. I'm very excited about that. It is going to be our ladies division. Women's wrestling is really evolving, and it's not just your one match anymore on a card where, people might just, it's an added attraction. It's like a midget match or a this or that or whatever from back in the day. It's literally, women's wrestling has evolved so much that now women can be the main event. They can do awesome things, and they are doing awesome things. And we are really going to showcase a ladies division with the Lady Liberty Championship. We have the tag team championships, which look amazing. They are a great throwback to some old tag team titles that you see with special designs. All of these designs designed by me, sketched out on paper. That's the coolest thing. You go to our website and you can check it out. Sketched on paper, sent to our belt maker, and our belt maker brings it to life. A belt that everybody is talking about right now that is driving everybody nuts. The Silver Screen Championship. The belt is the tag belts, by the way. So the Lady Liberty title is going to be on white leather. The tag team titles are on blue leather. The Silver Screen Championship is on red leather. and it looks like a TV. It's got the antenna sticking out of it and everything. And then it's got little movie reels, like the cut, black and white reels on the side, and then some film reels on the side of that say USW. It's absolutely amazing. It is a title that I probably have received well over 200 emails about in the last couple of days of people just saying, wow, that is so different. That is outside the box. The Silver Screen Championship. So that's the only place you can find it is USW. The USW Silver Screen Championship. It's one to talk about. And then, of course, the main meat and potatoes of it all, the USW Heavyweight Championship, which I will be wrestling for on Saturday, September the 23rd against the Lumberjack Huck Sawyer at IAW in Manassas, Virginia. Get your tickets now.
Ooh. So in closing, if any of my fans would like to pick up some Brian Hardy merch, where can they find it?
Well, right now, the easiest way to get in touch with me for anything, you can go to Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Brian Hardy Music or at Brian's Wrestling Collection, which is my YouTube series. You can find me on Facebook at those same handles. And then there will be a lot of USW merchandise coming out this year that will be able to be found on Instagram at the official USW or Facebook at facebook.com/United States Wrestling. For all that stuff, we got trading cards coming out. We've got action figures coming out. We've got puzzles. We're taking it back to the 80s. I mean, the days where you could literally get a puzzle of Junkyard Dog or Paul Orndorff or Hulk Hogan or this or that. You're going to be able to have a Brian Hardy puzzle. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, for any of my young fans that are watching the show that want to get in the wrestling business, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing I'll tell them is to stay in school. That's what I tell everybody is get that education first. That's the most important thing. You get that education, and then once you do that, just at least finish high school. If you don't even go to college, fine. I do recommend some people go to college to have that fallback plan. Find a reputable trainer, and what I mean by reputable trainer is I don't mean you don't need. Here's the biggest misconception about people in the wrestling business. They feel like they've got to find someone straight off WWE TV and pay, $6,000-$7,000 to train with them and this and that, and whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying if you have an independent in your area or you have a guy in your area that has done some pretty decent stuff in the wrestling business, find them, talk to them, see if they're willing to train you. Like I said, a common misconception is I do and don't believe in two different things. I don't believe in the guys that, have these humongous wrestling schools with all the bells and the whistles and the lights and everything like that. And you're like, wow, I'm going to learn something here. Because once again, the mistake I made was I went to a guy who had the wrestling school and had the guardrails and had the entranceways and had this and had that. And I never got anything for my money. I never got an education in pro wrestling at all or anything like that. Some of the most talented people that I've ever met in the pro wrestling industry have trained people in their basements on crash mats and crash pads, honestly. And you read a lot of people's books and you hear a lot of people's stories about training in the barn or training, on crash mats or this or that. So once again, just find someone that you trust, find someone that actually knows the professional wrestling business. I've trained over a dozen people in my career so far. All of them went on to do cool things and live their dream. But I haven't done it in the fashion or the sense that people think that, once again, you don't have to have the big glitz and glamour wrestling school and stuff like that, because I've trained people in some pretty crazy conditions, honestly, and they went on to do cool stuff. So
I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Brian. It really means a lot. It was awesome to see you again and know you're doing really awesome things. I'm Joe Panther III.
I'm the second generation sensation, Brian Hardy. You are watching the coolest, the hippest, the most radical podcast of all time, Dudes at Ringside.
And we will catch you guys. Hope you guys have a great Friday. Good. Have a good day, everybody.